about right, isn't it? Well, afternoon or good evening, I should really say, shouldn't I, everybody? And tonight we're going to look at 2014 from a prophecy point of view. And it's amazing, really, that we're here again, because it doesn't really seem 5 minutes ago since we were doing the exact same thing, but there was 2013 on the slide. And it doesn't seem that long when it said 2012 and 2011 and 2010, I think, was the first time that we started doing this. And I think it's fair to say that each year gets ever more dramatic, would you, when you look at the things that are happening in the news. We were just talking with Richard just before it started, and I think if we had cut out the last sort of, 5 years or 10 years and moved from that point to this point that we're at now, we would be amazed at what we're seeing. I mean, we're still amazed now at what we're seeing, but we've seen the things building up over time. And so perhaps it loses some of its dramaticness, if there is such a word. So we're on this journey, aren't we, through life? There's this wide road that the world is all on. And of course, this wide world that the world is on, is actually, as we know, leading to worldwide judgment and a time of trouble such as never was. And people are blindly going around their everyday lives, eating and drinking and buying and selling, have no idea what is about to take place on this earth, because it's a tremendously dramatic thing that is going to happen. The time of trouble, I think even we, probably don't fully appreciate just how bad the time of trouble is coming on this earth. But of course, that isn't really why we're focused so much on prophecy and looking at what's going on. It's because, of course, as we go down this road, eventually it will lead directly into the kingdom, as Luke said in his prayer. And we've got to go through this time. And we've got to be looking at these signs so that we're wide awake for the day when the Lord Jesus Christ appears in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So we're going to have a look at some things that have happened in 2014. Obviously, there's a huge amount, as I always say, and how do we fit it all into an hour? And the answer generally is I don't, and it goes over an hour. But we'll try and do it in as the right sort of time frame for us all. So, okay, 2014. If I was going to ask you, and in fact I am, what are the key things that happened in 2014 from a prophecy point of view that we should be interested in, what would you say?
More belligerent Russia.
Russia, exactly. Who said, was that Barry said Russia? Yes, so we've got the situation in Russia. And Barry said belligerent Russia. You hadn't seen the slides, had you, Barry? But there we are. You see, we're well connected mentally with that. So we certainly do need to have a look at Russia, don't we? Because that was a big, big news story. But we're going to look at that in a little bit of detail to see exactly what went on. And obviously, we're going to look to see what the Bible says in relation to what's been going on. So Russia is a big, big story. Any other big stories from a prophecy point of view? Yes?
The controversy over Temple Mount.
Right.
Growing and growing.
Yeah, so we've got, if I could put it in a slightly wider picture, we've got a growing conflict in relation to Israel. In fact, of course, we saw actual conflict, didn't we, in the middle of the year in Israel, and we're seeing increasing tensions in the region. So we're certainly going to have a look and see what's happening in relation to into Israel. Yes, Richard?
Greater isolation of Israel, especially with the United Nations and nations of Europe declaring the Arab cause.
Right, so there's, again, in relation to Israel, and we'll certainly pick up on this, the nations voting against Israel, dividing it in two, and we'll have a look at that most certainly. Yes, that will come under the Israel heading again. Anything else? There's one big sort of news story that we didn't mention once last year, and that was because we'd never heard of it.
Oh, ISIS.
ISIS. So this time last year, were we mentioning ISIS? Had we ever heard of ISIS? And yet there we have now the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or IS, the Islamic State, a caliphate suddenly, well, it was, from my point of view, appeared from nowhere. I don't know whether anybody else had been watching it quietly develop, but I don't really think many people had. I was looking back through news reports beforehand to see if I'd missed something or whatever, but there was no mention of it really at all. And bursting onto our scenes was this caliphate that covers basically a large territory inside Iraq and Syria, and of course the third one there that we've got, which is the situation in Israel. These slides look to be fairly dark on the screen compared to my laptop here, so are you able to see this okay? Right, so those are the three big headings, okay, that we're going to look at. We're going to look at the situation with Russia. We're going to have a look and have a look at ISIS and see what the Bible might say about that. And we're going to have a look at, in some detail, at what's happening in Israel. Lots of other things happened during the year, no shadow of a doubt about that. But basically, those are the three things that we are going to look at. You've all gone in the dark now. Are you okay? Right. Oh, that's excellent. So, what we're going to do, first of all, then, is have a look at Russia. So I've gone on to some news websites to find one that, in around about 2 minutes, was going to summarise the situation in Russia. So here's the news clip. It's an American news organisation, well-known American news organisation, and in roughly 2 minutes they try and go through the situation in Russia. So here we go with Russia.
It's been a year of conflict and turmoil for Russia's President Vladimir Putin. His country's tipping towards recession. Plummeting oil prices, oil and gas make up more than half of all Russian exports, are crippling the economy. Western sanctions have barred Russian banks and companies from global capital markets, leading to the ruble losing about 40% of its value. As 2014 draws to a close, Standard & Poor's is considering cutting Russia's credit rating to junk status. Now, many in Moscow's middle class find themselves no longer able to afford the imported goods and overall standard of living to which they've grown accustomed. Russia's relations with the West are the worst they've been since the Cold War. A year ago, German Chancellor Angela Merkel was one of Mr. Putin's reliable partners. Now she warns of the danger he poses. NATO countries are still seething over Mr. Putin's seizing, back in March, of the Crimean Peninsula from Ukraine. And few will soon forget these images. Bodies and plane wreckage strewn across Ukrainian territory controlled by pro-Russian separatists. In July, Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 exploded after allegedly being shot down by an anti-aircraft missile. 298 people were killed. It took weeks for an international team to get access to the crash scene and properly recover the bodies. Ukraine and U.S. officials blame the attack on Russian-backed militants. Mr. Putin and Russian state media blame Ukraine. A final crash report isn't expected until next summer. Despite all this, there's one problem Mr. Putin doesn't have: his apparent popularity with the Russian people. Even with their confidence in the economy slipping, 80% of Russians still seem to support him. They see him as a tough leader, capable of standing up to the West. The solution to, not the cause of, Russia's pressing problems.
Okay, so that seemed to me to be a fairly accurate review of the things that were happening in Russia there. The other thing that I thought we'd have a look at is, obviously each week I'm doing the weekly World Watch slides, and one of the things that I tend to do at the end of the year is sort of collate all of the slides together that are in relation to one particular topic. So, for instance, Russia. So obviously over the year there's lots and lots and lots of slides, lots and lots of different subjects. So, but when you go back and sort of pull out all of the headlines in relation to one of those subjects and then literally watch it all the way through, it's quite an amazing thing. Well, I find it so. So what I've done is gone back with Russia and pretty much pulled out the headlines, not all of them, otherwise we'd be here all night, but I've pulled out all of the headlines in relation to Russia, and they're going to flow in a minute chronologically from the start of the year right the way through to the end. And what I'm going to do is literally read out the headlines that were coming out of the newspapers as the events were happening. And you're going to see the headline straight from the Telegraph or wherever it was. And in the top right-hand corner, you'll see the date. And we're going to rattle through these very, very quickly. And in 2.5 minutes, we're going to do the whole year in headlines. And just so you don't get too bored as I read these out to you, I've got some music playing in the background, okay? So here we go. So, and all this has got to be timed to finish when the music finishes. So otherwise it looks a bit wrong. So here we go with this. I might have to adjust the sound in a minute. You'll have to read that one yourself. There we go. Right. So Foreign Minister criticises West for supporting Ukraine protests. War of words between Obama and Putin over Ukraine. Financial crisis threatens Russia as Ukraine spins out of control. Russia war games over Ukraine prompt American warning. Ukraine accuses Russia of armed invasion after Crimea airports blockaded. Ukraine pleads for Britain and America to come to its rescue as Russia accused of invasion. World scrambles as Russia tightens grip on Crimea. Putin has transformed Russian army into a lean, mean fighting machine. Putin mocks the West and threatens to turn off gas supplies. Angela Merkel, Russia will not get away with annexation of Crimea. Russia and the West fail in last-minute Ukraine talks. NATO chief, Crimea invasion could be just the beginning. Russia risks new Cold War, West warns as Putin prepares to swallow Crimea. Russian troop build-up now covers essentially the entire Ukrainian border. New Statesman, it's time to rearm. The West must stop appeasing Russia. G8 suspends Russia for annexation of Crimea. NATO orders end to cooperation with Russia. NATO military chief, Russia could take Ukraine in 3 days. Vladimir Putin threatens to turn off the gas. West threatens new Russia sanctions as Kiev warns of World War III. Ukraine crisis, G7 agree new sanctions on Russia. NATO official, Russia now an adversary. Russia conducts large-scale nuclear attack exercise. Russia shows off military might in parade in Moscow's Red Square. Vladimir Putin makes triumphant visit to Crimea as 20 separatists killed. US releases satellite images of Russian forces near Ukraine borders. Time magazine, Premier, President, Tsar, what Putin wants. Russia threatens nuclear strikes over Crimea. Britain and America implicate Russia in flight MH17 missile attack. Russia threatens to hit British companies in retaliation for sanctions. Russia introduces ban on most food imports from EU and US. Putin, don't mess with nuclear-armed Russia. Putin privately threatened to invade Poland, Romania and the Baltic states. Russia will add 80 new warships to Black Sea fleets as its fleet commander. Russia deploying tactical nuclear arms in Crimea. Moscow caught watching Israel from Syrian border. Ukraine accuses Russia of sending 32 tanks into rebel-held territory. Russia sends warships north of Australia in Purat display. Putin stockpiles gold as Russia prepares for economic war. David Cameron compares Russia to Nazi Germany on eve of Putin meeting. Angela Merkel warns Russia could seek to destabilise the whole of the European peaceful order. Vladimir Putin vows that the United States will never subjugate Russia. Russia faces recession as oil crash and sanctions cost the economy £90 billion. Putin, West is trying to defang the Russian bear. Official, Russia plotting to start war on Israel. And that's December the 20th, and we finished on time there. So those are the headlines. Now, it's quite dramatic, isn't it, when you see it like that? Just one headline on its own is dramatic. When you see the year being played out in that sort of way, it's a very, very powerful thing that's been happening this year. This headline is just astounding, I think, because this one is saying that Russia is in such a deep hole right now because of the economic situation that they're actually planning to ignite a war, lo and behold, in Israel. So it actually says there Russia's planning to ignite a war in Israel in an alleged contingency plan to trigger a direct military conflict between Hezbollah and Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's regime. That's not saying Hezbollah and Syria are going to be fighting against each other. They're saying that those two powers will be ignited to fight against Israel. And so we'll look more at that in just a moment, but that is, of course, very serious situation indeed. And perhaps one that we can see with Bible in hand as well. So there's all the things that have been going on in Russia. And before we open our Bibles and look to see what's actually been, how we compare what's been going on to our Bibles, I think what we'll do next is have a look at Israel. So the next thing we're going to do is play another video, again from the same news agency, a couple of minutes, reviewing primarily what's been going on, I think, in the conflict that happened there in the middle of the year. So let's just have a look at that now. So this is from the BBC News.
Israel launched its latest military offensive a week ago on July the 8th. Since then, more than 170 Palestinians have been killed, most of them civilians. At least 1,200 have been wounded. Over the same period, almost 800 Palestinian rockets have hit Israel. Another 200 have been intercepted. Some Israelis have been injured, but so far no one has been killed. Just how this latest escalation came about is inevitably the subject of debate. But a climate of heightened tension was created by the kidnapping and killing of 3 young Israelis in the West Bank and a young Palestinian in Jerusalem. The political environment was already poisonous. 8 months of US-sponsored diplomacy had collapsed, and Israel had condemned an effort by the 2 main Palestinian factions, Fatah and Hamas, to patch up their own bitter feud. As for Gaza, well, it's been under a severe military and economic blockade ever since Hamas took control in 2007. Israel allows in humanitarian supplies, including food and fuel, and says the blockade is vital for its own security. Aid agencies say it keeps most of the Gaza Strip's 1.8 million Palestinians living in poverty. And remember, more than half of these people are already refugees. The role of Egypt is vital in all this. While the Muslim Brotherhood was in power in Cairo, it opened its own Rafah border crossing into Gaza and allowed smugglers to use hundreds of tunnels below it. But the new government of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is much less sympathetic to Hamas. The crossing is largely closed. Most of the tunnels have been destroyed. And if the events of the past week feel very familiar, that's because we've been here before. This is the 3rd substantial Israeli assault on the Gaza Strip in recent years, all launched with the same stated purpose: to stop the rockets. In December 2008, it launched Operation Cast Lead, which included a major ground offensive. 4 years later came Operation Pillar of Defense. This time, Israeli forces did not invade. The latest operation is called Protective Edge. The army stands poised to enter the Gaza Strip, but the order to go in en masse has not yet been given.
So there we are, we remember those events, and we're going to have a look in just a second, again as we did with Russia. We'll go through some headlines right now from the Weekly World Watch, which I'll read out, but you'll see, I think, something quite interesting that perhaps maybe we forgot that happened before that war actually began. And I think when we, again, run this through, well, it surprised me when I looked through and suddenly you can see something quite interesting that happened just before the Gaza war actually began. So here we go. I'm going to read out these headlines again, all in relation to Israel. Not quite so many to get through, but here we go. So Israel celebrates 66 years of independence, May the 6th. Pope Francis makes his first official visit to the Holy Land. Pope invites Israeli and Palestinian leaders for Vatican peace prayers. Pope Francis hosts Middle East peace prayer at the Vatican. Exactly 1 month later to the day, Hamas fires rockets at Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Israel launches ground offensive in Gaza. Gaza death toll passes 300 as UN Chief Ban Ki-moon heads to Israel. Hamas calls for third intifada after violent riots in Jerusalem and West Bank. Israel calls up 16,000 more reservists as US supplies army with ammunition. Gaza truce holding as 10,000 Israelis join protests in Tel Aviv. And now we see these events happening following the Gaza war. UK MPs vote overwhelmingly in favour of recognising Palestinian state. Sweden recognises Palestinian state on October the 30th. November the 26th, Palestine recognised as a state in principle by the European Parliament in symbolic vote. December the 2nd, Palestinian states with the French National Assembly vote overwhelmingly to ask the government to recognise Palestine. Israel slams Irish decision to recognise Palestine on December the 11th. Israeli PM slams Europe taking Hamas off terror list. That was on December the 17th. Israel announces discovery of offshore gas field, the third one to be found in the past 5 years. We've already looked at this slide. Russia plotting to start war on Israel. And on Boxing Day, IDF deploys Iron Dome in rising Gaza tensions. So it's quite an interesting pattern of events there, don't you think, when you see that flowing through with the peace prayer, and literally a month later, well, we didn't see peace, but we saw war. So there we go. We've looked at Russia. We've had a look at what's been happening in Israel. And I'm just going to play a short video clip about ISIS, and then we'll open our Bibles and have a look and see what the Bible says we should be looking for. So again, this is a news clip. It's the same channel as the original, as the first American one that we looked at. So hopefully you can hear it okay. And we'll have a look and see what was happening with this new group called ISIS.
June 10th. The radical Islamist group known as the Islamic State dramatically raises its ruthless profile in a series of lightning raids inside Iraq, including overtaking the country's second largest city, Mosul. The group, also known as ISIS or ISIL, started as Al-Qaeda's branch in Iraq before morphing into its own entity and expanding into Syria. They quickly earned a reputation for viciousness, holding mass executions of captured Iraqi and Syrian troops, beheading Western journalists and aid workers, and then posting graphic videos of these acts online. In fact, the footage is used as propaganda to beckon foreigners to come join the battle to create a pure Islamic state. An unknown number have. President Barack Obama says the U.S. can wait no longer. It must get involved.
Left unchecked, these terrorists could pose a growing threat beyond that region.
He orders airstrikes and forges a coalition that includes Arab countries. But Mr. Obama pledges no American boots on the ground. Others will have to do the fighting in what he says will be a years-long effort. Officials say months of sorties have slowed ISIS's momentum, but there are few signs that ISIS has been snuffed. Far from it. And heading into 2015, world leaders remain unable to answer the question when, how, and by whom these jihadists will be stopped.
Okay, so that's all we're going to say from the news review part of ISIS, but we'll look at them more as we go through right now. So those are the three big events, and I guess one of the questions in our minds might be, how do all these things tie together? How does the Hamas Hezbollah situation fit in with the Russian situation? How does that fit in with the European situation? How does it fit in with the ISIS situation? How does all this come together? And that's what we're going to try and answer, okay? So what I'm going to suggest to you is, and you might not have heard this before, because I basically haven't read it anywhere before, but this is, I guess, just by reading the Word of God, this is my conclusion to how all these things fit together. You might disagree with what I'm about to say, but this is what we're going to try and demonstrate. I'm going to try and prove to you that in fact there isn't just one final conflagration, one final great big war. There are in fact 3 stages to the final judgment of the world. There is stage 1, there's stage 2 and there's stage 3. And I think once you see that there are different stages, we're not trying to force all events into, say, just one chapter and try and make everything fit into one place. I think once you see that there are different stages to it, and they're clearly defined separate stages to the final judgment of the world, then suddenly lots of things, I believe, fall into place that might have been a bit tricky to see beforehand. So in terms of the different stages, this is the way I am viewing these different passages. So the second stage, and it's one that we as a community have focused a lot in on, is quite rightly the Ezekiel 38 / Daniel chapter 11, one might even say partly Daniel chapter 8 situation, which is actually, I believe, stage 2 of the final time of trouble and judgment of the world. And these chapters deal with 9 nations. So when you look at Ezekiel 38, there are in fact 9 nations that are mentioned there. And those 9 nations are Magog, Meshech, Tubal, Rosh, Persia, Togarmah, Gomer, Ethiopia and Libya. And we're going to have a look and see who those nations are. But I think, suffice to say that on any sort of ancient map, which was, that would have been at around about the time of Ezekiel himself, those nations are clearly identifiable as predominantly Russia, Turkey, and Ethiopia, as we now would know it, probably more like North Sudan and Libya. What I don't think is that there's any element in amongst that of Europe as we now know it. This is the eastern leg, if you like, of Daniel's image. Of course, there's many books that will argue that Gomer represents, parts of Europe. I don't think it does. I think what we're looking at here are 9 nations, and we'll look on a map in a minute as to where they are. There is a stage that comes before that, and the stage that comes before the invasion, this second stage, this invasion headed up with Russia, is an initial stage which is detailed out primarily in Psalm 83 and Isaiah 17, but I'm going to show you at the very end of all this, there's another very, very key couple of chapters in Zechariah that also detail out these 2 separate events very clearly. But in Psalm 83, these aren't nations that are mentioned here. They're 10 tribes. And the 10 tribes that are mentioned in Psalm 83 are Edom and the Ishmaelites and Moab and the Hagrites and Gebal and Ammon and Amalek and Philistia, Tyre and Assyria, or Asa, it says in the Authorized Version. This is stage 1 that comes before stage 2. It's part of the final overall story, but it is definitely happening before stage 2. The final stage, stage 3, involves not 10 tribes or 10 nations, but in fact 10 kings, and these people really nothing to do with stage 2 or stage 1. These are mentioned specifically in Revelation 17, and of course also in Daniel as well. But these people, which we haven't really got the time to look at in any detail this evening, we know from Revelation 17 are a harlot woman and beast and 10 horns and 10 kings. And we know that this is a war with the religion of Rome and Europe against the Lord Jesus Christ. That is nothing to do with this war. It's nothing to do with this war. Now, there are three parts to this war because they're doing three different things. And the first stage I am going to show you is all to do with Israel's relatives. These tribes that are surrounding Israel, they're not all related, don't get me wrong, but many of them are related to Israel. These peoples that are surrounding Israel itself, I'm calling them Israel's relatives. And it's a war about the actual land itself. Stage 2 isn't about the land. Somebody want to tell me, make sure you're still awake. What is stage 2? What is the objective of stage 2 according to Ezekiel 38?
Spoil.
Spoil. That's nothing to do with religion, is it? Spoil has nothing whatsoever to do with religion. It's actually got nothing really to do with land. It's about spoil. We're told that categorically that's what it's about. And therefore, this isn't about relatives, this is about riches. But stage 3 is not about relatives, and it's not about riches. It's not about spoil, it's not even about the land. What is it that the final stage 3 is actually all about? What one word could sum up the final war? As you say, religion. In fact, of course, I haven't got time to show you this, but if you remember, in 1 Corinthians, the Lord Jesus Christ, we're told, puts down all rule, authority, and power. And those three things that the Lord Jesus Christ, it's a little study for you at some point, but all rule, authority, and power are the three stages to this conflict. Because those three definitions, rule, authority, and power, link back exactly into those three things that take place. So, you might not buy into this. You've got to have a look to see whether you see if it fits in your mind. But we're now going to go through. And what I'm going to do to start with is just start off with stage 2. Because, of course, the focus in stage 2 is to do with Russia. And we've looked at Russia on our screens. The focus of stage 1 is to do with Israel and its immediate neighbours. And we're going to therefore see how that clicks in. And if we've got just a couple of minutes, we'll put up a slide or two just about stage 3 and the religious aspect. So what about these 9 nations then of Ezekiel 38? Well, as we've already said, I'm going to put up the names on the screen. Hopefully you can just about read that. That says Magog. And next to it in brackets, I'm putting where I think, according to ancient maps, the territory is. Now, some have written and said, well, of course, that is the territory it was, but we need to track the migration of where the people went to. And I don't think that is scripturally sound to actually say where the people have migrated to. Otherwise, Israel is no longer Israel, because the people migrated all over the place. So Israel's now in New York or somewhere. It is nothing to do where people migrate to. It's where they lived at the time Ezekiel was writing, and that unlocks many, many things. So Magog, at the time that Ezekiel was writing, was in what we now call southern Russia. We'll put all this on a map in a minute. Meshech is what we would now know as central Russia. Tubal we would now know as eastern Russia. And Rosh we would now know as northern Russia. Persia we would now know as Iran. Togarmah we would call now eastern Turkey. And Gomer we would call western Turkey. Libya we would call, well, modern day Libya in northern Africa. And Ethiopia is actually pretty much the current territory of northern Sudan. So that's how I see Ezekiel 38. Now the interesting thing, of course, is when you drop this onto a map, it looks quite strange. Because there it is on a map. So everything in this solid dark colour here is basically the territories that we've just listed out. So we've got all of Russia up here, we've got Turkey here, we've got Iran here, we've got Ethiopia here, we've got Libya in this territory over here. You'll notice that I've completely excluded Europe and the UK out of this, because I just don't think it's mentioned. I think there's a division straight down the line here. The two legs of Daniel's image are causing that division, and that division is clear for us to see even today. But what is it that strikes you quite interesting from that map? Anything that grabs you about that map?
They're not immediately surrounding Israel.
Right. Nobody's touching Israel. There's a hole in the middle of it all. There's this gap in the centre of it all. Now, is it the fact that all of those nations are at peace with Israel? Is it the fact that all those nations are friendly with Israel, so we wouldn't expect them to be fighting against Israel? Well, the answer to that, of course, is that all of those nations, well, not all of them, but certainly some of them are, and certainly peoples within those areas, certainly are very well, not on side with Israel at all, and are their enemies. So especially when you look at Syria, especially when you look at Iraq, certainly elements within Lebanon. So let's just have a look at this a little bit more in a little bit more detail. So I just want to show you something interesting here, because one of the key things is well, have a look at this. Let's open our Bibles. Have a look at Ezekiel 38. There we go, we've got a bit of light now. So Ezekiel 38. We've read it a lot of times, but just think about this for a second. It says in verse 2, Son of man, set thy face against Gog of the land of Magog. Now, if I was to ask you, where is Gog from? Well, you'd probably have to say he's of the land of Magog, because Gog primarily is of the land of Magog. He's also of some other places. He's also chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. But the number one place that this man is being associated with is Magog. Now, there's a lot of people say, well, Magog, of course, is Germany. So we're basically saying that Gog is of Germany and also of Meshech and Tubal. I just don't think that is the case. And in fact, historians will tell you that it isn't the case, because Josephus, who wrote this book, Antiquities of the Jews, in his chapter 6, says Magog founded those that were from him were called the Magogites, but are now called by the Greeks the Scythians. So when you understand that the Magogites and the Scythians are one and the same people, according to Josephus, you then find maps of where Scythia actually was, and it's absolutely nothing to do with Germany. It's actually all to do with what we've been saying all along. It's southern Russia. And what is astounding about this particular map here, and it's not just one that I happen to find that does this, most of them do this. Here is Scythia in this orange blob all around here. But do you notice that this orange blob comes right over into this territory here? And the reason it goes a slightly different colour is because I've superimposed onto it the current territory of the country of Ukraine. And what is astounding about that is that ancient Scythia cut Ukraine exactly in half. So this blue line coming around here is the whole of Ukraine, and ancient Scythia cut Ukraine exactly in half. And so Gog, who was originally a real and historical person who actually ran the area of Scythia, which is now predominantly southern Russia, therefore is a Russian leader, we're told is of the land of Magog. So this is all Magog, but notice it's pushing into eastern Ukraine. Now tell me, what's on the news at the moment? But Putin, ruler of southern Russia, taking over eastern Ukraine. Is that not what's on our news? Do you think this is a coincidence? It isn't. It's nothing to do with taking over Germany. In fact, Germany and Russia have pulled apart over this. Absolutely wrenched apart. But he is determined to take over eastern Ukraine, which is the ancient part of ancient Magog, ancient Scythia. Now, Gog, of course, as I've already said, was most certainly a real and historical person. This book here, called The Empire of the Tsars, written by an historian called Ragozin, says that Gog, king of Magog, was originally a real and historical person, none other in fact than chief of the Scythians. Same thing that Josephus said. Scythia and Magog, same thing. Gog is ruling them. And of course, Gog, if you look it up in Strong's Concordance, means a mountain. This is somebody that sees himself on high, who's very proud and puffed up, who sees himself looking down on everybody else and mighty and powerful. Now, of course, our current leader over there, or the current leader, I should say, is this man here, of course, Vladimir Putin. Now, this man, when you stop and look at this character and what he's like and what he's doing, ticks the boxes in relation to the man that we're looking for, a latter-day Antiochus Epiphanes, a latter-day king of the north, extremely aggressive, anti-Israel, and pushing now at his borders. If we wanted to invent a character that would fit the description of Gog, would we not invent Vladimir Putin? Now, in this chapter that we're looking at, of course, it says in verse 10, "Thus saith the Lord God, it shall come to pass that at the same time shall things come into thy mind, and thou shalt think an evil thought. And thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages to take a spoil and to take a prey." So this man decides to be motivated by spoil, by goods, by cash, by something to do with what he can get materially from this adventure, horrific adventure, by coming down into the Middle East. Nothing to do with religion, is there? When you read that, there's no religious element to this war whatsoever. It's purely about the money. Which, of course, gets interesting when we see this headline, which we've already looked at, that Israel announces discovery of offshore gas field. And of course, this is now the third one that's been found in just very, very recent years. They've been there for over 60 years before they found any of this stuff. And now they're the largest gas finds in the world in the last 10 or 15 years. These are immense gas finds that have now made Israel an exporter of gas into the region. And there's a number of Arab countries and even Europe that's looking at buying this gas off Israel. Now, why that is interesting is because of this. Russia is in, suddenly, a massive crisis, of course, since the invasion of Ukraine. There is absolutely no coincidence that there's Russia's ruble in red, and there is Brent oil price in blue. And Russia goes in around about here, and then suddenly, overnight, the gas price, or the oil price, in the ruble collapse. The two are obviously related, and this is collapsing because the blue line is collapsing. The oil price collapsing is crippling Russia. It's gone from positive GDP into negative recession within months. And that is because the bulk of the Russian economy is depending on its gas and oil sales. And when those prices collapse to the extent that they have, it causes massive pain. Now, this blue line on here, or greeny coloured line, is where Russia needs the price to be to balance its books. If it drops below that line, it's in all sorts of trouble. It says there, look, they need oil to be at $105 a barrel. And today, for the first time in many, many years, it dropped below $50 a barrel. So it's even below, this is at 60, here it's now below the bottom line. That's how fast it's going down. It's half the price it was. Now, how's that happened? This has happened through Saudi Arabia pumping oil at maximum capacity. Now, why are they doing that? Because this is hurting them as well. This is seriously hurting them. It is because, and why is America suddenly flooding its fracking scheme that it's got over on its territory? It's flooding the market with its oil that it's got over there as well. They could stop it overnight by slowing down production, but they're keeping it flat out, causing everybody some pain apart from us filling up with fuel. The country that hurts mostly in all of this is Russia. And what this is massive, massive payback from America using Saudi Arabia, its ally, to punish Russia severely for what it's doing. And it's crippling them and causing immense strain on Russia. This is one of the headlines. This is the 23rd of December. Did the Saudis and America collude in dropping oil prices? This isn't some, crazy website that's trying to come out with all conspiracy theories. This is Reuters, which are basically saying, look, something's going on here. Now, what is remarkable about all of this is this man, over 150 years ago, wrote this. So John Thomas, in his book, Help is Israel, published in 1849, said these words: "Let the Russian treasury be as empty as it is said to be, and its expenditure exceed its revenue by double the alleged deficit. It will only operate as a pressure from within, causing her autocrat, Gog, to enter into the countries and to overflow and pass over, and to enrich himself with the spoil of those he is destined to subdue." Now that man had great insight, foresight. What was he doing though? He was reading the Bible 160 odd years ago and worked out that if Russia is coming to take a spoil, there must be a hook to put in its jaws to pull it down, and that must mean there's internal pressure, and he worked it out. That's astounding, isn't it, in the lives of what we're seeing? Do you not think that is just incredible that he saw that? And here's another way of looking at it. So here's the Russian bear, here's the sanctions causing enormous pain, and here is Britain and America predominantly, and little Russia, Europe stood there. But another way of looking at this cartoon is the king of the south, says Daniel 11 verse 40, which is Britain and America predominantly and Saudi Arabia, shall push, which means to provoke, at him, which is talking about Putin and Gog and the king of the north, and then the king of the north comes against him like a whirlwind. So the king of the south provokes the king of the north, and because of that, the king of the north comes down. That is what is playing out. Now, there is more provocation maybe to come. The sanctions that we're seeing are winding Russia up to a huge extent, but there could well be more propagation, because that word push actually literally means to gore, like an animal with a horn would gore somebody. So it's some serious amount of pain that's being caused. But you might well say that what's going on here is causing serious pain, wouldn't you? So now Putin sat there with a major problem on his hands, and tonight, I guarantee you, he's sat with advisors right now saying, what are we going to do? Oil has now fallen below $50 a barrel. We are now in some serious trouble. We're burning cash at a rate of knots. There's crisis in the air. They've put interest rates up from 6% to 17.5% to try and hold up the ruble, and none of it's working. They're bailing out the banks. They're on the edge of a precipice. So Putin is sat there, and I think what he's thinking about doing is this. You know what we could do? We could cause trouble. We could cause some serious trouble. Because one surefire way of getting oil prices shifting back up is to cause trouble. And one way that oil prices always shoot back up is through conflict and war. And so what you might well be thinking is, I'm going to set fire to somewhere. And lo and behold, while we were thinking these thoughts, this headline that we've already quoted appears as a WND exclusive saying Russia is plotting to start a war on Israel. A French official has revealed the plan as Russia's weapon against America and the European Union amid increasing sanctions on Moscow. According to WND, the official, who has requested his identity to remain unknown, said Russia's plan to start a war in Israel was born out of Russia's increasing isolation due to Western sanctions. Now that's quite astounding, don't you think? Is it unbelievable? I don't think it is unbelievable. I think it's highly likely that we might see this happen. And therefore, coming back to this bit here, if Russia does drop a match into the area around Israel, what does it actually do but sparks off stage one? Russia itself could spark off stage one, and when stage one actually is finished and completed, you'll see why in a second it decides to do stage two and invade the vacuum that has been left with the burning situation that was left after it had ignited it. So Putin is currently holed up in the Kremlin in his stronghold hold up here, and I'm suggesting might well set fire to this particular region. Which brings us to Psalm 83 and the 10 tribes. So just as we went through the Ezekiel 38, let's just canter through the peoples, the tribes of Psalm 83. So here's how I interpret the nations of Psalm 83. You might want to look up Psalm 83, in fact, to see where this fits in. And I truly do believe it does. So it's Psalm 83. I just might read these words to you from maybe verse 2. It says, "For lo, thine enemies make a tumult." So there's some noise going on. This isn't a quiet situation. There's a noise of war. "They that hate thee have lifted up their head." There's action. "They have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted thy hidden ones. They have said, Come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against you. The tabernacles of Edom and the Ishmaelites, of Moab and the Hagarenes, Gebal and Ammon and Amalek, and the Philistines and the inhabitants of Tyre. Asa also is joined with them, and they have been helped by the children of Lot." So there's this group of people here that, are totally and utterly against Israel. So the tents of Edom refers to some nomadic people in the Jordan area. And of course it's in Jordan right now where there is in fact tents of Palestinians left over from the creation of Israel. These are people kept in tents even today. They've been there for 50 or 60 years. There are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of these people now. And this, I believe, are the people that are being referred to here. I might have a picture, if I remember to put it in. The Ishmaelites are, again, a tribe in northern Saudi Arabia. Moab is a nation. So this is one of the few in the list that's actually a nation, and this is Jordan. The Hagrites are actually a tribe that were based in Jordan. Gebal was a tribe based in northern Lebanon. Ammon was a tribe based in Jordan. Amalek was a tribe based in southern Israel. Philistia was a tribe which is exactly where we would now see Hamas, the Philistines, and modern-day Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. Tyre is specifically a city within Lebanon, which is, if you look upon Wikipedia, the stronghold of Hezbollah. And Asa, or Assyria, is a nation which corresponds exactly to ISIS. Exactly to ISIS. So let's just put some of those nations on the map. So you see now here's Israel. Look, there's the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom of Judah. There's Philistia, there's Amalek, here's Edom, here's Moab, here's Ammon, Assyria really is further up around here, but they've put it there on the map to fit it in. And there's Tyre, and there's Gebal, and you see how surrounded Israel is by these people. This is a totally different picture, isn't it, to Ezekiel 38. Now, you notice, of course, that in verse 8 it says, Asa is joined with them. So there's a group of people called Asa, and if you look in your in modern versions, it will say Assyria. Now have a look at this. Here's ISIS, and this is the territory of ISIS in this red blob here, and it's covering some of northern Iraq and north-east Syria, and that is their territory. Now when you go in and put Assyria, original Assyria, ancient Assyria, into your, especially at the time that we're talking about when David was writing, what you'll find, and I haven't made this blob up, this is exactly what came out of Wikipedia, that red blob corresponds to ancient Assyria, and look how it corresponds to the red blob on this map that is indicating ISIS. So suddenly upon our scenes have appeared a people forming a caliphate, an Islamic state, whose stated aim actually is to destroy Israel and to create a much wider caliphate in the Levant, which includes Israel. And here they are, based up here. Well, they're killing each other. We know that. But actually, their main focus, as with all Islamic religion on the fanatical side, is to actually bring this little country of Israel to an end. It's quite remarkable that we see ISIS appearing on our screens right now at this time. Now, of course, other nations, well, not nations, peoples that are mentioned, of course, in here, as we've already said, we've got the Philistines. So the Philistines correspond identically to Hamas. We've got Asa, which is based in Syria and northern Iraq. And we've actually got Syria itself threatening Israel last year that we looked at. And we've got the inhabitants of Tyre. It's quite amazing, you know, that the inspired writer of Asaph in Psalm 83 doesn't say Lebanon, or doesn't say Phoenicia, which would have indicated the whole country of Lebanon. He says the inhabitants of Tyre. And the inhabitants of Tyre correspond exactly to modern-day Hezbollah. And this is the remarkable thing. So all of these nations, all these peoples, I should keep saying, are getting stirred up, we're told in Psalm 83, to launch a conflict against Israel. And this is when Isaiah gets fulfilled. Because Isaiah 17 tells us that Damascus will be removed from being a city and will become a fallen ruin. Now, to some extent, of course, Damascus has become a ruin, and so on. But actually, it hasn't completely ceased from being a city. It is still there, and this man, Assad, still rules as king. But you know something? Damascus will get removed from being a city. And it's going to happen during stage 1. In the same chapter, Isaiah 17, it says the fortified towns of northern Israel. It actually says Ephraim in your Bible, but I've converted Ephraim from the code of Ephraim into northern Israel, because that's what it's referring to. The fortified towns of northern Israel will also be destroyed, and the royal power of Damascus will end. In that day, Israel's glory will grow dim. Its robust body will waste away. The whole land will look like a grain field after the harvesters have gathered the grain. This initial conflict, you know, over Israel by the inner ring of nations and peoples will cause Israel, northern especially, a great deal of pain. But Israel wins. They destroy completely Damascus. And there's a time of so-called peace. Because Israel's immediate pains in the neck, literal pains in the neck, i.e. Hezbollah and Hamas and Syria, are wiped clean. They're gone, they're finished with. And Israel collapses in a sort of heap after exhausting itself from this particular war that it goes through, and is left intact but beaten up. The others are ruined and destroyed and gone, but Israel is left in quite a difficult situation. And it could be that there's some form of peace agreement that's forced upon Israel at this particular point in time. But it doesn't last very long, because here's what happens. Isaiah 17, you can't really see this picture because of the screen's a bit dark, but these are huge waves pouring into a city down here. Because at the end of Isaiah, chapter 17, it says, "Listen, the armies of many nations roar like the roaring of the sea. Hear the thunder of the mighty forces as they rush forward like the thundering waves. So you see, after Damascus falls, and after stage 1 is complete, there is then the armies of many nations roaring like the roaring of the sea, rushing into the vacuum that's left. This is Ezekiel 38. It's the outer ring of nations rushing now in to take control of this territory of Israel and Syria and possibly Iraq and other parts of that particular area. Now you might say, we might say when we finished, but I've nearly finished. But you might say, well, fine, but you've grabbed a passage from Psalms, and you've grabbed a passage from Ezekiel, and you sort of try to say that these, and from Isaiah, and try to say that these are separate events and so on. Is there anywhere else in the Bible that indicates that there is a part 1 and a part 2? And you know something? There is. And they're put nicely together and packaged up beautifully. And we've read it many, many times. And we've always, I think, considered them as one and the same event. But when you stop and switch the light on this and look at the words and see what it's saying, you suddenly realise, no, they're not the same event at all. All along, God was describing stage 1 and stage 2. And does anybody know where we're going to go?
Zechariah.
And the answer is Zechariah. You see, Zechariah chapter 12 and Zechariah chapter 14 are not one and the same event. Zechariah chapter 12 begins, I will make Jerusalem like an intoxicating drink that makes the nearby nations. This is a more modern translation, but even in the AV you get the sense of surrounding nations. Nearby nations stagger when they send their armies to Jerusalem and Judah. We're specifically told these are surrounding nearby nations. Does that sound like the first inner ring war? Well, it certainly does to me. Now look what it says in verse 6. On that day I will make the clans of Judah like a flame that sets a wood pile ablaze, or like a burning torch among the sheaves of grain. They will burn up all the neighbouring nations, right and left, while the people in Jerusalem remain secure. Isn't that astounding? This says Jerusalem survives and actually remains secure. Jerusalem, of course, is in the southern part of Israel. It's basically saying that ultimately there's a war, that their armies come against them, but Israel wins and burns them up. But notice, they burn them with the flame that they've been set alight with. So they have been set alight, and they use that very fire to go and burn them. And Jerusalem survives. Keep it. Nearby nations sending their armies, neighbouring nations, Jerusalem secure. That is exactly what I've been saying, reference stage 1. Isaiah then says, all nations now rush into the void, and there's a great conflict once more. And what does Zechariah 14 say? But exactly that. I will gather all the nations. Now it doesn't say nearby nations anymore, it says all the nations to fight against Jerusalem. Does it say that Jerusalem is secure and survives? No, it jolly well doesn't. It says the city will be taken and the houses looted and the women raped, and half the population will be taken into captivity and the rest will be left among the ruins of the city. And you're going to flee. And you're going to flee as you did before the great earthquake in the days of King Uzziah of Judah. And then the Lord my God will come with all his holy ones with him. This is the return, actually, of course, of the Lord Jesus Christ, isn't it? With the saints, as it says in the AV. And you see, brothers and sisters, the judgment has taken place somewhere between here. Because how does Jesus return with the saints in Zechariah 14 if the judgment hasn't happened before? You tell me that. It can't. The judgment has come before. Jesus arrives when Gog has decimated Israel with the saints. And he comes because Jerusalem is being actually ruined as a city. We're told that. And so there is stage 1 and there is stage 2. And then, of course, there is still... So Israel's relatives and the land is sorted out. Israel's riches has been sorted out. But there's a final war. And this is Israel's religion. This is a religious war. And we find that, this is pretty much the last slide, depicted as a woman riding a beast. Now here's the interesting thing in Revelation 17. This doesn't talk about Christ coming with the saints. This says something very interesting. The 10 horns of the beast, we're told in Revelation, are 10 kings. We know that the 10 kings are associated with Europe. This is definitely Europe. And we know that the woman riding the beast is definitely Rome, because we're told that the woman sits on 7 hills. And the Catholic Encyclopedia itself says Rome is built on the 7 hills. They will be appointed to their kingdoms for one brief moment to reign with the beast. They will all agree to give him their power and authority. I don't think we've had this yet, but we're close to 10 kings actually creating a super-state together, excluding Britain. Together, now look what they do. Together they go to war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will defeat them because he is Lord of Lords and King of Kings, and his called and chosen and faithful ones are with him. Brothers and sisters, the war of Europe and the Lamb is against an established Lord Jesus Christ and saints in Israel. How could Zechariah 14 be that war? Because Jesus comes at the end of it. After the war is pretty much over, he comes to rescue the remnant that's there. This is together they will go to war against Jesus. We're going to fight this man. We're going to go and fight the people with him. This is a holy war, it's a religious war, and we are heading it up. And if we weren't at all certain that the woman holding the golden cup is anything to do with anything other than this man here, well, there he is in his scarlet and purple colours, holding the golden cup in his hand. He's almost done that just to say, look, here I am. And so we really are, I truly do believe, on the brink of the millennial reign of the Lord Jesus Christ, because this one thing is for certain. The return of the Lord Jesus Christ doesn't have to come, certainly it's got to come before the third stage. It's got to come before the second stage, because the judgment has been taken place at the time when Christ and the saints arrive with Jesus onto the Mount of Olives, when that second war has already been underway. It can come from between now and some point up to then. When it is, we don't know. But I would suggest, looking at all the things that we have seen happen, then it's surely really right at hand. This last slide I haven't put graphically very well yet, because I've only just dreamt this up. But here was what I started off by saying, look, then comes the end, when Jesus will have delivered up the kingdom to God, even the Father. His job is to do 3 things: to put down all rule, authority, and power. Why are we told there's 3 things? Rule is all to do with territory ruled by a leader. Look it up in Strong's. Rule is all to do with territory ruled by a leader. That's to do with the land. The Palestinians want the land, and that gets sorted out in stage 1. Israel keeps the land. But then there is authority that Jesus has to sort out, and the authority is in the scriptures denoting strength of government, and that is to do with kingship. And the Lord Jesus Christ, when he comes back, is removing those who think they're strong and establishing himself as king, and removing Gog, this mighty mountain who's thinking of taking over the world. And the word power, when you look at power, it's all to do with moral power and the power to do miracles. This is religious power. And the Lord Jesus Christ, in the third stage, will establish himself not only as king, but as priest, when all the godless religion is finally removed. Sorry I've gone on a bit too long, but I'll probably call it a day at that point. Let's hope that 2015 is the year when Jesus does return.